Hi guys, I have to be really quiet. It's me. It's my disguise. Rassi and them are in the building. They found me. I turned off the GPS so that they can't track me. Because they know I was going to make a prediction video and they want my insights. Because I'm clever. Let's take a quick look at the upcoming Rugby World Cup Final 2023. It's Bokke versus the old foe, the All Blacks. And it's going to be a game. Conditions are said to be wet. It's going to be raining from about 2 p.m. all the way to 2 a.m. High humidity. Yeah, it's going to be a slugfest. Springboks have named their team going with a 7-1 split, so they brought in the nuke squad to absolutely blast everything. Absolutely stoked for Dion Fourie, Trevor Nyakane, Oxenche, and especially John Klein, who went from being an Irish starter to being outside of international rugby in general. So really happy for them. Absolutely stoked. And then yeah, it's going to be a tight match. 100 Pollard starting there to kick all the penalties. I do think it's going to be a very slow game. If the rain subsides for a moment, we might see flashes of running rugby, but I don't expect too much. But nonetheless, we'll take a good look at what both teams have to offer in terms of defense and attack, and especially taking into regards recent events and recent matches, comparing how people have adjusted to the All Blacks attack, Springboks defense, and what we can see from the different matches. So yeah, let's jump into it.
Okay, so if we look at the New Zealand attack and the way New Zealand plays in general, they very much prefer to play into space. So they don't necessarily have a set attack or a set move. They do have some strike moves that puts them in a position to attack space, but New Zealand is all about finding space and attacking the space with multiple runners. So New Zealand likes to play off 9. So Aaron Smith usually getting the ball. He's obviously got a massive pass on him, fast, straight, just beautifully crisp. That feeds directly into their dual playmaker system. So they will use Mo'unga and Barrett, or Mo'unga and McKenzie, or McKenzie and Barrett. Although in this case, I suspect it will be Mo'unga and Barrett to be their playmakers. So the playmakers, they will identify the space and identify where to attack. And usually playing off 9 means the other pass to a forward pod. This is just to generate a little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room. And then from there, the forward pod might pass out the back into a playmaker in the boot, or they will then carry into contact, setting up the next move. The next one we're going to take a look at is the short side attack. So the short side attack has a high work rate. This is usually when they're on the front foot. So what they'll do is they'll play 1 to 2 phases to create a short side on either side of the field in the 15-meter channels, and then using their dual playmakers, they'll stack up on both sides, splitting the defense, and then attack the blind side with numbers. So usually putting 1 tight forward, tight 5 forward, 1 loose forward, and a winger on the blind side, and then attacking through there, trusting the tight 5 forward to be able to clear out if there's a tackle, the loose forward to punch the hole, and the winger or the back to make it to the try line. So that's the short side attack. This has got a high work rate because what they tend to do is they follow a 2-1 pattern. So they'll attack infield for 2 phases and then switch back to the short side. So 2 inside, and then going on the 3rd phase, going short side again. And they will continue that. They're happy to play, even if that short side attack doesn't work the first time. They will go 2 phases infield again just to come back to the short side. They also use the cross kick. And what's interesting about New Zealand in this case is they cross kick more than any other team, any other tier 1 team. And they've got the wings to do it. I mean, Talea and Jordan have been on fire this World Cup, absolutely finding the space whenever Mo'unga or Barrett finds it. And they tend to use this if there's no space for the short side attack and if they've condensed the defense a little bit. So they will carry 2 or 3 phases, have the defense condense around the forwards, and then expose out wide with a cross kick. And Barrett, Mo'unga, doesn't matter who does it, they're pretty much on the money. They are a little bit predictable in this sense. We saw France prepping for it. So France were very much on the rush. And then the moment they saw ball go to boot, they would stop the rush, swing around the back, regather the ball, and then set up from there. So you can be alert to it. France very much exposed how much they like the cross kick, and New Zealand struggled to adapt in that game. If we take a look at the maul, New Zealand have recently come into their own in the maul. While they might not use the scrum as much as an attacking platform, and they can hold their own, in the maul they really excel, and this is thanks to their forwards coach Ryan, who has just absolutely, he's taken them up to another level. I want to say they're on par with the Springboks in terms of maul attack and maul defense. So what they do in the maul, they'll double stack, and what that means is once the lifter has lifted the receiver and the receiver's got the ball, they will twist to put the receiver down into support while throwing their shoulders into the space. And that effectively prevents the defending team from getting to him and tying that ball in the center. It also allows them to create sort of like a little space that allows the supporting players to punch into it. And when we take a look at how New Zealand utilizes the maul, it very much looks like a scrum. They approach it very much like a scrum. So they're using scrum-like binds. You will see they're binding over the shoulder, under the arm, very tight group, driving together, very synchronized. So they've really stepped up their synchronicity at this level. And then on maul defense, it's become incredibly hard to score tries against New Zealand via the maul. Again, this is their forwards coach just stepping up, taking it up to the next level. Often on maul defense, we saw this in the game at Twickenham. If they see that you're going to go for a maul, they won't contest, they won't jump, they'll conserve energy, stay low. They're going to set up like a scrum, meaning they're already having their arms out, ready to bind. As soon as the feet hit as soon as the jumper actually goes up, they're binding, they're waiting for the jumper to land. As soon as he lands, the locks engage. Now, what's very important here, the locks or the lifters set really, really low, the same way I almost want to say they set for a scrum, so that they can get underneath you and unseat the opposition lifters, meaning those first players into contact can't really make proper contact and get proper go forward or momentum. And again, it's set up like a scrum. They're using tight binds, and what they seek to do is they just want to destabilize your maul and have you going from one side to the other side. And as soon as you start, twisting a little bit, their loose forwards are going to go around to that side. So if you're going towards the touchline, the loose forwards will come round and they will force you into touch, or they will force you infield, or the maul will get sacked and it's their ball. And they are good at it. What happened at Twickenham, though, very interestingly, and I don't think we're going to see this again, was they had some problem with timing. The referee punished them a lot for early hit. So before the lifter was on, not the lifter, the receiver was on the ground, and they already were hitting the Springboks, and they got penalized for that a couple of times. I don't think that we're going to see that happen again. This is going to be a wet game, so we're obviously going to see a lot of kicking. There might be a lot of lineouts, so maul defense and maul attack will definitely come into it. I don't know if we're going to see the cross kick so much. The conditions might favor New Zealand a little bit in terms of handling. They'll be better prepared for the wet conditions, but it might be a gamble. If it's raining really hard, the ball can become unpredictable. You're not going to have as much distance to it. But yeah, this game is very much alive and well, and I dare say the team that adapts to the wet conditions will be the team to take it. Now let's take a look at the South African side here. What's unique about the South African attack is it's very much dependent on the back three players. So that will be our wings and our fullback. The centers usually punch holes and they give us some good go forward, but we're not really relying on the centers to set the world on fire, especially not with Lukhanyo not fulfilling that 13 role. So our wingers carry the most in the 15 channel, much more than other teams who have their wingers stand in a little bit closer. It just makes it easier so that when the defense comes rushing outward, it's not that easy to get tackled into touch. We obviously back our wingers to be able to find the gaps and the spots, and I want to say more times than not they tend to stay within field. Very few times that they're actually tackled into touch, but it does happen. And then we also use our number 15 as a secondary playmaker, very similar to the All Blacks, although be it in a lesser way. So for us, the 15, in this case being Willie Leroux, Willie Leroux often slots in. He will stand back, scan the field, identify opportunities, and speak to Pollard, organize the guys 1-2 phases, and then we'll launch the strike move. He's very talented at being a try assist. We know this. And if we have Damian Willemse on the field, it's a bit of the opposite. He's much more in the mold of Stuart Hogg, so he will tend to run it back at you. Good under the high ball, solid on attack. He's got a nice step, he's got some speed and size. So he's good both ways, both defensively and attackingly. And what he presents is he just offers that opportunity to break the line and then get the ball away. Now, if we look at the South African defense, the famous South African defense, which is one of the hardest to beat and break down, it consists of a couple of things. So first of all, we seek to rush, and this is what helped us a lot in the quarterfinal against France, is that consistent line speed. We're hitting you behind the gain line. We want to hit you before you've had any momentum. It's a lot easier to stop someone getting momentum than to stop someone who has momentum. So not only do we want to stop the attack, we also try and stop the attacker by pressuring them before they've got momentum. What we also do, we generate slow ball by contesting every ruck. We always challenge the ruck. Now in this case, what happens is either we get the turnover or we slow the ball down. If we slow the ball down, that buys time for our defense to set. And then obviously the famous out to in wing defense. So in the South African defensive setup, the wingers act more like a 13, coming from the outside and then shooting in to blitz the attack before it has time to go wide. So again, there has been exploits, but what we seek to do is we seek to stop the attack before we stop the attacker, because one man can be contained, but if you've got 2 or 3 in space, then you've got a real problem on your hand. And this is where it gets sort of technical. The South African defense has got a rush pressed with a center drift. So what we tend to do is there will be a rush, so Damian Dailende or Jesse Kriel will rush and the other center will drift. And what we do is one center rushes out and they will commit to the tackle. The other center drifts, he's covering behind the wing if there's a pass over the top or a cross kick. And then once we have committed to the tackle, we are driving you back towards the forwards because we don't want you playing side-to-side rugby. Side-to-side rugby tends to stretch the defensive line and that opens opportunities. And then, just pressing the breakdown again, going for the turnover. So the South African defense in that setup is very, very hard to beat. And it also allows for a lot of flexibility. What we saw also is that the South African defense is the basis for their attack. South Africa lives off counterattack. And this is why we don't have very complicated strike moves or things like that. So what we tend to favor is working on defense. If we don't have the ball, we get penalized less, and then we can force you to commit to penalties. Or what we can do is we can get turnover ball, and while you are still transitioning from attack into defense, we are kicking back at you and we're chasing. So you're disorganized, you're under pressure, and all we need is the right bounce of the ball, and Kurtley Arendse, Pieter Stef du Toit, Jesse Kriel, Damian Dailende, name any one of them, and then they're in space and we're on the front foot. And that's really, what we seek to do with our aggressive defense is just break spirit, break them down mentally, and then as soon as there's a slip, press and counterattack as hard as possible. I will say this, for me personally, a sign that a Springbok team is feeling confident, that they're feeling good, and that they're really in a good headspace is when we run variety, when we don't run the same moves repetitively. The weather conditions on Saturday might not allow us to run a lot of variety or, backline strike moves. But I will say that if we stick to the maul, that tells me that the team is not in a positive headspace. A Springbok team who's in a positive headspace, if you look at the 2019 final and the famous Qatar Airways Cup match right before the World Cup against New Zealand, no line out had the same move. There was constantly varied moves off the line out. Kwagga peeling back, Dion Fourie coming into space, all sorts of moves where no line out had the same thing happening. And that tells me that the Springboks are in a good space. So if we see that on Saturday, we know they're in a good space and they're really trying to press. The Springboks will have some of the work cut out for them. The conditions are not their typical conditions. Some of our players will be used to it. Handré Pollard obviously being the perfect candidate for 10 in this weather. He plays for Leicester Tigers. He's been playing in Europe. he is made for this. We know he's got ice in his veins. So yeah, whenever he comes back to South Africa, I don't think he's paying for a drink anyway. But yeah, so he's perfect for it. And picking a 7-1 bench by Rassie and them, I also think is a good move. It is a bit of a gamble in terms of backline. If anything happens to the 9 or one of the wingers, we're in a spot we don't really want to be in. But again, the weather conditions might not allow for the backline to come into it that much. We'll have to see what happens on the day. But I do know that Rassie and Jock and the whole coaching team will be practicing. From what we've seen coming out of the Bok camp via Instagram and Facebook, we've seen that they are practicing in rainy conditions. We know that for the game against Romania, I believe, they were practicing with balls soaked in water with dishwashing liquid to make them slippery. So they might have been doing similar things. And yeah, I think this is a big opportunity for South Africa to prove that, forwards belong in the game, because a lot of people out there believe that forwards need to be mobile and they need to be running and they need to be less strong and less big and more like centers and flankers. And I don't like that, because the scrum is a unique part, the line out is a unique part, and there's a place for props, there's a place for hookers and locks in rugby, and that's what makes the sport beautiful. So I want that 7-1 bench to really shine on Saturday and really show the world that there is space for forward players in rugby, and it isn't necessarily boring to watch forwards play a grind out match. It is very interesting, it is very exciting, and close matches are what we live for. So yeah, Rassie announced their team earlier today. I completely missed that. That's my bad. But yeah, really excited for the team. Not much has changed. Mani Libbok not starting, which I think is a good thing, with the conditions being what it is and the stakes being what they are. I don't think necessarily he did anything wrong. His substitution in the semi-final was not because he made a mistake. His substitution was more in regards to the conditions they were playing in and the game plan that suits him not being executable. So it's not that he did anything wrong. He didn't miss a kick. His kicks out of hand wasn't bad. So yeah, we definitely gonna see more of him in the future. But I do think this is a game where we can stick to Andre Pollard. And if we see that we need to open it up, we've got Billy Leroux on the bench. And if all else fails, fuck it. Put Kwagga at 9. I would love to see Kwagga Smith at 9. Put the Honey Badger at 9. I will pay good money for that.
Okay, so yeah, I do think the Springboks have a slight edge here in terms of the bench. Our bench forwards are of a higher quality and they bring a bit more of a dynamicism to them. The big question is big game mentality. I mean, the Springboks are fired up. They've had 2 close calls getting to the final. Some might say that we've had we weren't supposed to be here, but my counterpoint would be that's the mark of a champion team, finding ways to win when you're not supposed to. So the Springboks have had to dig deep. I think they've got the mental advantage in this case, and that's just gonna play in their favor. For New Zealand, it's everything to play for. They want to prove their coach right. They want to prove that they're still the best team in the world. But I don't know if they've got that fire. I don't know if they'll be able to dig deep. I'm not writing them off at all. I'm just saying that, the New Zealand team has a mental skills coach who assists with visualization, motivation, and those types of intrinsic things. And I don't think the Springboks necessarily need something similar. They've got a lot of passion, and Jock and Rassie and all the coaches have always been good at showing them the bigger picture. If we look at the previous Rugby World Cup final, the match talk wasn't about tactics or what to expect on that day. It was simply saying, look, there's bigger things at home. This pressure is a privilege. The real pressure is South Africans not knowing where their next meal is coming from, not knowing if they're going to make it to payday, trying to figure out where to get money to fix the car or pay for the doctor or buy medicine for their child. That's real pressure. And I think it's going to be the same. And the Springboks have embodied this. They know that South Africa is a land of hardship, that South Africans suffer. And what they do is they provide a brief respite in a land of corruption, load shedding, unaffordable living costs. There's so many things to name. And they offer something that all South Africans dream of. that unity of a bunch of people looking at something together and working to achieve it. And I think that is what drives the Springboks, is the fact that they are the best of South Africa. They are the best of us. And they deserve to win, because South Africa needs a win. South Africa needs a big win to keep us in the fight right now. There's a lot to be negative about, and this will be a massive positive for us. And I think that's what Rassie and Jacques will be saying again to them, is you don't have the luxury of letting your head hang down. If you fuck up, if you miss a pass, if you drop a ball, if you knock it on, shake it off, get back, do the next one better, clear the guy out, run the line, make the tackle. This is all or nothing. And I have to say that suits the Springboks, because the Springboks are an all or nothing team. They are very much all or nothing. Good luck to the Bokke, good luck to the ABs. Whichever team wins deserves it, but I hope the Bokke bring it home. Stronger together, guys.